Hello, welcome to the Enchanted Kingdom of Hermione. We're up here in the Turret of Pleasure, and the Crown Prince and I are attempting to synchronize the Titanic hitting its iceberg with the Britannic hitting its mine. We're not really doing it very well, but there you go. It's not really that important. I'm your host, Zip Gun. I'm the Lord Chamberlain of the Enchanted Kingdom, and we are in the Turret of Pleasure. And I'm here to enlighten you about my rediscovery of a band that I've been listening to for 51 years, I believe. And they've always been a presence in my life, but they were rarely intruded far into my consciousness until just very recently. And it's funny because I can re-evaluate them in 2020 and compare that with my impressions of them in 1969 when I first became aware of them. And this is a band that I have come to really enjoy recently. But even when I was 10 years old in 1969, there was a troubling sort of hokiness about this band that kind of confused me, and I wasn't sure if I liked it or not. And the band we're talking about is Redbone. And Redbone were a band created by a couple of brothers, Pat and Lolly Vegas, who had spent 10 years on the club circuit in California. They'd been going since maybe the late 50s. They were, oh, there's the mine. Look, Winston. Oh, bang, that would wake you up. Back in the 50s, Pat, the bass player, Lolly, the guitar player, they were a team of brothers. Pat and Lolly, I can't remember Lolly's real name, but it's very Hispanic. And their surname was Vasquez/Vega. Vega being their stepdad's name, I do believe. And they were playing in LA in the clubs and early on. And I think Pat did a couple of Fabian-like singles that were kind of crooner singles. He was very young. I think he was 17. And the owner of one of the clubs that they played at, who was an Italian guy, he told him, you know what, you should change your names. People don't like Hispanics around here. People don't want to hire Hispanic musicians. And so they took this to heart, and they thought about it for a minute. They thought, well, Vega, we need something American, white. So they just added an S, Vegas. Pat and Lolly Vegas. Hey, that sounds great. They'll never know we're Mexican. And Pat and Lolly Vegas are from Fresno, and apparently, from what I understand, from the research I've done, grew up identifying as Hispanic Americans. But they were very much like so many of us, mixed between a lot of different things. But Vasquez Vega, I do believe the Hispanic culture was preeminent in their developing years. And they did some singles. They got into the surf music craze. Lolly was and well, he's dead now, unfortunately. But Lolly was a terrific guitar player, and really, the more I've listened to him, especially recently, the more I can appreciate what a really tasty guitar player he was. And they did a bunch of surf singles under various names to cash in on the surf craze. And then they started playing, I believe they were the pit band for Shindig, and they appeared on Shindig a few times, kind of as a duet, singing and playing the bass and the guitar. They got signed to Mercury in '66, did a record called At the Haunted House, which was a club that they were the house band in. Leon Russell and Snuff Garrett produced it. About half of it is covers, decently done, stuff like I Got You, James Brown, some Ike and Tina Turner. And the rest of them were originals, which were mostly sounded like British invasion pop. And they're quite well crafted. Not genius or anything, but good. Very solid. You know, clearly these guys were pros. And they were a trio. Pat and Lolly Vegas, their drummer went on to play with the Beach Boys forever and ever as a touring member. Anyways, around this time, the story goes, Jimi Hendrix saw them and thought that Lolly was one of the greatest guitar players ever, and he suggested that they form a band of First Nation guys, or as they called them then, Indians. This story, I think, maybe isn't really super accurate because what I do know is that this gentleman, David DePoe, David DePoe? Pete DePoe. Sorry, Pete. Pete DePoe, now sadly no longer with us either. He was in the audience one night and basically approached these guys and said, "You need me as your drummer." And they went, "Okay." And I guess they auditioned him. And sure, they liked him. He was good, and he is very good. Now, Pete is an honest-to-God, 100% Native American, and just for good measure, he's from Nia Bay, which is about 30 miles that way. And Nia Bay is kind of the sister community to Port Renfrew. Nia Bay is in Washington State in the United States. Port Renfrew is here in British Columbia in Canada. And in the old days, there was much interaction between the two communities. And I know this because my children are members of the Port Renfrew Nation, and many relatives live in Nia Bay. And when any major thing happens, like a funeral of an elder or anything, a lot of people from Nia Bay show up, and vice versa when an elder in Nia Bay. So anyway, he came up with the idea. He says, "You guys sound like Indians." And so we should dress up like Indians because you guys are, you know. So here's the four Vegas brothers who spent a decade trying to be white. Suddenly it's like 1969, the kids, the college kids, they'd probably love this idea. And so their first manager was Bumps Blackwell, of all people. Little Richard, he discovered and produced Little Richard's first records. And Bumps knew a thing or two about show business. So very quickly, this band was formed. Tony Bellamy showed up. He's Yaqui and Mexican. And looking very understated here. I'll show you a better picture of him later. And very quickly, they were signed to Epic. Back in 1969, when just about anybody with a pulse got signed. And Epic was so excited about having real honest-to-God Indians, having a real honest-to-God band, that they made their debut record a double record. Now, the double record contains the song Nicky Hokey, which was actually a song that Aretha Franklin did, and PJ Proby had a hit with it. So again, these weren't greenhorns. These guys have been there and done that. They'd also worked on a record with a guy whose last name was Ford, which absolutely went nowhere, but a lot of people think it was very seminal. And that had a couple of songs on it. It had Nicky Hokey on it, and it had a song called Crazy Cajun Cakewalk Band. Now, Crazy Cajun Cakewalk Band has a riff. Do 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 do, and that it goes through the entire song, and it's played by Lolly Vegas on his guitar through a Leslie speaker, which was his trademark. And throughout most of their career, Lolly played through a Leslie, Tony played through a wah-wah, and this was the greatest 1-2 guitar punch. Lolly played most of the solos, but not all of them. And as a fan of two guitar punches, these guys are second, perhaps only to Reggie Lucas and Pete Cozy, in my opinion. Miles Davis's guys from the 70s. And so they put this record out. It did okay. It was on Different Strokes. Anybody remember Different Strokes? Oh, no, this wasn't. The next one was. But I remember hearing this on FM radio, CKLG-FM, the first alternative FM radio station within my radius of being able to get it. And there's 4 or 3 jams, some people would call them jams. They're actually more than jams. One's called Jambone, oh boy. One's called Sweet Mode, S-U-I-T-E. And the jams on this record, I mean, it's a double album, so yeah, you can have jams. But the jams on this record are actually really fucking good. And there's some really good guitar playing. I completely forgot in the intervening 50 years just what a good guitar player Lolly Vegas is. And what a great bass player Pat Vegas is. And for that matter, the other two guys. These guys could all really play. And they played really well together. Pat Vegas sounds a lot like Bootsy Collins. And Lolly Vegas sounds a lot like Bootsy's brother. A very chicken picky kind of soloing style. There's your inner sleeve. I mean, yeah. Now the thing is, even as a kid, I kind of thought, okay, I get it. They're Indians, and Indians is the word they use. If you're gonna get mad at me, get mad at this guy. Morgan Amos, contributing editor for High Fidelity, writes the liner notes of their next record. Now this record is, needless to say, slightly more concise than the last one. It does feature, sadly, and I mean, it's not terrible. I don't mind it. But the side one begins with a drum going gung, 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 gung. And then they start to do the, what I would call a very stereotypical Indian chanting, and there's a, and it's all very hokey. If you did it today, that you'd be flayed. But it then, of course, is hard edited into one of the funkiest things you'll ever hear. They sound a lot like the Meters. When they get funky, these guys are funky. And the song that leads this album off is called Maggie. And Maggie, you know, you can't really even understand the words because it's in such a kind of a patois. Maggie was a book and gain. Ooh la Ricky hook and chain. And Lolly Vegas sings it. He's got a sort of a black sound to his voice. But Maggie is a really great song because it really is that sort of, there's this real honest to God Native American quality, flavor to it. And the music makes sense. It makes sense that they sound the way they sound, being who they are, which is a very disparate group of guys from all over the place. Now, the funny thing about Redbone, I forgot this part. They had gotten together with Bellamy and DePoe, and they had just started playing as Redbone, went to visit their grandmother somewhere before the first album came out, and she sort of said, "You guys still playing your music? Oh yeah, we got a new band called Redbone." It means, Redbone means half-breed, but as they say many times I've seen, if you say half-breed, you start a fight. Redbone is okay, apparently. And they sort of go, it's kind of funny, we're dressing up like Indians, and she goes, "Well, what's weird about that? You're Indians." They go, "We are?" They didn't know, apparently. So apparently they were impersonating Indians, not knowing that they were Indians. Now this, again, 50 years ago, this was acceptable, and a lot of liberal type people probably liked this band just because they were First Nations. Now, the happy thing about this is, I don't care what color these guys are or what their lineage is. They're a really good band. And some of their lyrics are a little bit hokey, but again, we're talking 1970. There's a song on this called Judgment Day that's really, they were never very militant. Their approach was more peace, cooperation, respect. They did this album. Maggie made it to maybe the bottom 20s of the charts. Then they came out with this record, Message from a Drum. This is one of my favorite records of theirs because it's kind of weird. First of all, it has their first sort of hit, which was Witch Queen of New Orleans. I think that got maybe into the top 10. It didn't go that big. It has a Message from a Drum. It has a song called Niji Trance, which starts with chanting and drumming, which is maybe a bit much, twice on 2 records. There's a song called The Sun Never Shines on the Lonely, which sounds like a pop song from England in the 60s. There's a great song called When You Got Trouble, which is just rocking, just a rock song with very funny lyrics, actually. Again, 1970. There's 2 tiny 14-second long progressive rock instrumentals, 14 seconds long. You heard that right. There's one called Perico on the second side, and there's one called Max Blevitz. Max Blevitz. Look them up on YouTube. I don't know what they were thinking. They're just stuck in the middle of this record. There's a great song called One Monkey here. Now, this record really shows their scope. They could do a lot of stuff. I like it so much. I bought it in quadraphonic. Isn't that groovy? Look at this great quad record. Oh, and you've got the quadraphonic record from the company that brought you the LP. Ooh, that nasty gold label. Anyway, delete punch, of course. Who the fuck was going to buy this in quad? This record, now, Witch Queen did pretty good. The band kind of, each subsequent record kind of brought them up on the scale. And that's where my LPs end. Now, I've ordered, you can get all this shit on YouTube. It's everywhere for free. After this, they did a record called Already Home. Pretty good record. Didn't have a big hit on it. But it had a song they wrote called We Were All Wounded at Wounded Knee. And CBS completely lost their minds. This is 1973. Oh, it's a career killer. You can't put it out. Cannot put it out. Oh, okay. So they put it out in Europe. Took it off the record in America. Guess what? Number one hit single in Holland. Who fucking knew? So that was kind of, and it wasn't a particularly militant song. It's sort of a sad lament about how we were all wounded at Wounded Knee. And it was kind of funny because it was a hit, but it wasn't a hit. It was very hard to get in North America. Like, they wouldn't distribute it. And so the Already Home record didn't do very well. It sort of, it did okay. And then they put out, they had signed a 6-album deal with Epic. So they put out a record which featured their best cover. Finally, they figured out that if you want to do a First Nations themed album cover, get some First Nations art and put it on the cover instead. So Wovoka has this terrific red cover, which I really like. And it features, finally, their first honest-to-God big hit, which was, of course, Come and Get Your Love, which is a great sort of Motown-style romp. And it's just a kind of a love song. It features rather delightfully the sound of Lolly's newly acquired, I think it was actually Pat's, choral electric sitar, which he uses to sublime effect on this song. And this album is very solid. It features a song at the end called 23rd and Mad, where Mr. Lolly Vegas loses his fucking mind on the electric sitar. I've never heard anything like it on this particular instrument. It alone is worth buying the record for. But again, solid record, solid songwriting. Some of them are better than others, but you'll find really good songs hidden in the nooks and crannies. And so Wovoka came out, and it was, the album strangely didn't do as well as it might have, but the single made it into the top 5. And then they put out a record, Turquoise Tears. Oh, I can't remember the proper name. It had a really strange name. And it came out in quad. It featured a song that sounded exactly like Come and Get Your Love. There was a few more incidents of strings being used, and these guys used strings rather effectively, I thought. And it kind of sank without much of a trace. I mean, it barely charted. And their contract with Epic was over. And then they went through some turmoil. Pete DePoe left the band. He was sort of in and out, I think, after about 1974. I'm not really sure why. Tony Bellamy quit after the Turquoise Tears record. And they managed to secure a deal with RCA, just the Vegas brothers, and it says Redbone featuring Pat and Lolly Vegas. They got a new keyboard player who mercifully had a Mellotron. What's not to like? And Lolly did all the guitar playing on it. Produced by the guy that used to do War. What's his name? And it sounds kind of like Far Out Productions. But you know what? It's actually pretty damn good. Now, this is the record I expected to suck. And again, everybody gave it bad reviews. All Music gives it 2 stars. There's a song called Funky Silk on it that's actually really funky, and it's really good. If you listen to these records without preconceptions, they hold up remarkably well. And this record's from 1977. After that, it was all profit taking, live, live albums, playing "Come and Get Your Love" at state fairs and so on. There's a wonderful video, the Pat and Lolly Vegas story on YouTube, featuring Pat, who's the only surviving member. Lolly died in 2010. Tony died quite a while ago now, and I think Pete died a few years back too. And if you're interested in these guys, I highly recommend you look at this. Be warned, it is a very poorly made video. Really, really, the production quality is. But I'm a sucker for stuff like that. I really like videos like that. I got so into this. You can get all of this stuff on YouTube for free in great remastered sound. But me, here I am, right? So I've decided that I want hard copies of all this. I have ordered the CD of the first album, which was $20, a CD of the second, third, and seventh albums, which I think was $20, $15, and then the CD of the third, fourth, and fifth albums, fourth, fifth, and sixth albums. Sorry, that was $10 for 3 albums. I'm not gonna buy this. All remastered, long versions of the songs. The song I mentioned with the sitar freakout on it was actually released on CD, and they cut the end of it off, which is where he goes. He sounds like Sonny Chirac on this part. I can't believe they did that, but yeah, And sort of there you have it. I mean, if you are looking for a new guitar hero, I recommend delving into the Redbone songbook. Now, if you're like me, you'll go to a song and you'll get 30 seconds in and go, okay, I don't think this one's for me. That happens occasionally. They had a lot of scope. But they really knew what they were doing. They were seasoned professional entertainers. And so if it sounds rather cynical and hypocritical to spend the first 10 years of your career trying not to sound Mexican and then suddenly doing a 180 and trying to sound Indian, it was all because they were trying to make a living in the music business. And the fact that they were, in fact, First Nations, means that we're not going to tar and feather them, I suppose. And, I mean, if that's what it took to get them better known, well, in 1970, it wasn't such a bad idea. You couldn't do it now. Or if you were to do it now, you'd have to do it in a much more subtle way that, and it is sort of happening now. First Nations musicians are, again, there's a voice that is uniquely theirs. My dear friend Merrick Tyler is in a band whose name I sadly cannot pronounce. I've tried, Merrick, I cannot do it. My white tongue will not wrap around the words. And they're doing very well in Canada. They've been nominated for various awards. I should have researched this and made sure I could pronounce it. Sorry, Merrick. But this was kind of the tip of the iceberg, and they're very well regarded by most First Nations observers today. I do believe they're in the First Nations Musical Hall of Fame, or I forget what it's exactly called. And they have a right to be. And when you look at the Pat Vegas videos now, and I think he must be 80 now, he talks about the clubs, and he's very proud of his achievements, even when he was playing the strip as in a pit band, And I think he has a right to be, because he created, and his brother and his bandmates, a really solid body of work that it doesn't matter whether they were Indians or Martians or whatever they were. The work stands on its own. And that's always the final thing for me, is if the work is good. And if the message is good. I mean, I like the fact that their message was very peaceful and very, there was a lot of hope, there was a lot of respect, a lot of love in their sound. And who's to say the world doesn't need more of that? So there you have it, Redbone. Check them out. They're really good. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button, the notifications, if you want to see me do more of these. I might follow up on this when I get the CDs, just to briefly note things. But I'm going to go to YouTube and listen to Lolly Vegas play the fuck out of his Telecaster. Um, Crown Prince is in session. And we'll get back at you with more stuff. Thanks for watching. And take care of each other. We're not out of the woods yet. Vaccine's on its way. Keep masking up. Keep looking after each other. We'll get out of this in due course. As my friend Ford Pierre would say, in the fullness of time. Take care, everybody.